Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now let's start. The summer of 1887 had been relentless, baking the Oklahoma plains until they cracked like old leather. Cattle dropped from heat exhaustion, wells dried to dust, and the small township of Mercer had buried 3 children before July even arrived. Caroline Porter wiped her brow with a handkerchief that had once been white, but now bore the permanent rust-colored stains of the land. The one-room schoolhouse stood empty behind her, the children sent home early when the thermometer had burst in the afternoon sun. 24 students, ranging from 5 to 16, depended on her to provide an education that might lift them from the hard-scrabble existence their parents endured. But now, as she locked the schoolhouse door, possibly for the last time, Caroline felt the weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders heavier than the merciless sun. The town council had made their decision. With crops failing and families leaving, they could no longer afford to pay a teacher. Not even one who accepted payment in eggs, milk, and occasionally a chicken when coin money ran dry. "You'll be moving on then, Miss Porter?" Old Mr. Jenkins called from across the street, leaning on his broom outside the general store that held more empty shelves than goods. "It appears so," Caroline replied, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. 6 months of savings amounted to exactly $3.42. Not enough for a stagecoach ticket to anywhere promising. "Shame," he muttered. "Best teacher we ever had." Caroline nodded, not trusting her voice. She'd come to Mercer straight from Teachers College in Boston, full of grand ideas about bringing education to the frontier. Now, at 24, she felt decades older, her dreams as parched as the creek beds. That evening, she packed her meager belongings into a single carpet bag. The boarding house owner, Mrs. Sullivan, stood in the doorway, wringing her apron between work-worn hands. "You could stay, dearie. No charge until things turn around." Caroline smiled at the kind offer, knowing that Mrs. Sullivan could barely feed herself, let alone house a boarder for free. "I've heard they're hiring teachers in Caldwell. It's only about 100 miles north." 100 miles? In this heat? On foot? Mrs. Sullivan's eyes widened. "You'll die out there, Miss Porter." Perhaps, Caroline thought, but she wouldn't die here, watching a town slowly collapse around her. She'd rather fall trying to reach something better than wither in place. At dawn the next morning, Caroline began walking. The rising sun promised another scorching day, but the early hours offered a brief respite from the worst heat. Her sensible boots, resoled twice already, raised small puffs of dust with each step. The carpet bag, containing 2 dresses, undergarments, a Bible, and her mother's silver hairbrush, grew heavier with each mile. The first day, she covered nearly 20 miles before collapsing beneath a cottonwood tree near a dry creek bed. Her water canteen was half empty, her lips cracked and bleeding. She'd passed 3 abandoned homesteads, their windows staring like empty eye sockets across the prairie. On the second day, the wind picked up, driving stinging dust into her eyes and mouth. Caroline tore a strip from her petticoat to fashion a makeshift mask. By midday, she'd finished her water. By evening, she was counting drops of moisture squeezed from cactus flesh, a trick one of her students had taught her. The third day brought hallucinations. Her mother walked beside her for a time, chiding her for leaving Boston, for choosing adventure over security. Later, her students skipped around her, their voices echoing across the empty landscape. Caroline stumbled more than walked, her vision blurring at the edges. She lost track of time. Days melted into one another. At some point, she abandoned her carpet bag, unable to carry its weight any longer. She kept only the Bible, tucked into the pocket of her dress. Her tongue felt swollen, her skin blistered from sun and wind. Still, she pushed forward, one foot in front of the other, following the North Star at night, the sun by day. Miles away, Thaddeus Lawson stood on the porch of his ranch house, surveying his kingdom with troubled eyes. At 32, he'd built the Circle L into one of the most prosperous cattle operations in the territory. While drought had devastated smaller ranchers, his deep wells and careful management had preserved most of his herd. "Mails here, boss," called Samuel, his foreman, approaching on horseback. "Letter from your sister in St. Louis." Thaddeus took the envelope, the elegant handwriting a stark contrast to the rugged surroundings. Inside was another invitation to visit, thinly disguising his sister's real intention, matchmaking. 5 years a widower, and Margaret still couldn't accept that he had no interest in St. Louis society women with their corseted waists and practiced smiles. Anything else to report? Thaddeus asked, tucking the letter into his pocket. Milner's spotted riders on the north boundary. Might be Tanner's men moving cattle onto our grazing land again. Thaddeus sighed. Wesley Tanner had been pushing boundaries, literal and figurative, since arriving from Texas last year. I'll ride out and have a look. He saddled his stallion, Midnight, and rode north across land that had taken him 10 years to accumulate. Unlike many who'd rushed to Oklahoma with dreams of instant wealth, Thaddeus had worked methodically, starting with a small parcel and expanding only when he could afford it. Hard work and careful planning had built his fortune, not luck or shortcuts. The boundary line between the Circle L and Tanner's property followed a shallow ravine that, in better years, would hold a seasonal creek. Now it was just another scar across the parched earth. Thaddeus followed it westward, scanning for signs of trespassing cattle. Instead, he found something far more unexpected. A figure in the distance, moving with the jerky, uneven gait of someone at the edge of collapse. Through his field glasses, he could make out a woman's dress, torn and filthy, and what appeared to be auburn hair falling loose from what had once been a neat bun. Thaddeus spurred Midnight forward, covering the distance in minutes. The woman didn't seem to hear his approach, continuing her stumbling progress with the single-minded focus of someone clinging to consciousness through sheer willpower. "Ma'am," he called, reining Midnight to a stop a few feet away, not wanting to startle her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The woman turned slowly, her sunburned face barely recognizable as human under layers of dust and blistered skin. Her eyes, though, a startling green even through the haze of exhaustion, fixed on him with a momentary flash of awareness before rolling back in her head as she crumpled to the ground. Thaddeus dismounted in one fluid motion, reaching her before she fully hit the dirt. He cradled her head, shocked at the heat radiating from her skin. Severe sunstroke, dehydration, she was at death's door. "Hold on," he murmured, though he doubted she could hear him. He lifted her easily, too easily. She weighed almost nothing, and settled her across his saddle before mounting behind her. One arm held her securely against his chest as he turned Midnight toward home. "Martha," Thaddeus shouted as he rode into the ranch yard. "Martha, I need help." The housekeeper appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of the unconscious woman. "Lord have mercy," she breathed, rushing down the steps. "What poor soul is this?" Found her walking near the north boundary. "She's bad off, Martha. Heat stroke, dehydration." Together they carried Caroline into the house, to the guest bedroom that hadn't seen use in years. Martha's efficiency took over, directing Thaddeus to fetch cool water, clean linens, and her medicinal kit. "She needs a doctor," Thaddeus said, looking down at the unconscious woman whose breathing came in shallow, rapid gasps. "Nearest doctor's in Riverford, 30 miles away." "She won't last that long without immediate care," Martha replied, already cutting away the filthy, sweat-stiffened dress. "Send Jacob for the doctor, but we've got to cool her down now." For the next hours, they worked to save the stranger's life. Martha applied cool, wet cloths to Caroline's forehead, neck, wrists, and ankles. Thaddeus carefully spooned tiny amounts of water between her cracked lips. When she began to shiver violently despite the heat, Martha diagnosed the dangerous phase of heat stroke, where the body loses its ability to regulate temperature. "Who do you think she is?" Thaddeus asked as Midnight approached. The doctor had arrived an hour earlier, confirming Martha's treatments and adding some of his own. "No identification on her," the doctor said. "Just this." He held up a small Bible, its leather cover worn smooth from handling. Inside the front cover was written in careful script, "To Caroline Porter, with love from mother and father, on the occasion of her graduation from Pembroke Teachers College, 1884. A teacher," Thaddeus murmured. "Out here in the middle of nowhere. Probably from one of the townships that dried up," Martha suggested. "Poor thing must have been trying to reach somewhere else." "Will she live?" Thaddeus asked bluntly. The doctor sighed. "If she makes it through the night, she has a chance. But she's severely malnourished, dehydrated, and the sun damage is extensive. It'll be a long recovery, even if she survives." Thaddeus nodded. "She'll have whatever she needs." Later, After the doctor had left with instructions to be fetched if her condition changed, Thaddeus sat beside Caroline's bed. Martha had tried to send him to his own room, insisting she would watch over the patient. But something about this woman's desperate journey compelled him to stay. In the lamplight, with the dirt and dust washed away, he could see she was young, probably mid-20s. There was a dignity to her features, even ravaged as they were. A straight nose, high cheekbones, a determined chin. What would drive someone like her to walk alone across the merciless prairie? As dawn approached, Caroline's breathing steadied, and her skin felt cooler to the touch. Thaddeus found himself nodding off in the chair, only to be startled awake by a hoarse whisper. Water. Her eyes were open, those remarkable green eyes, confused but aware. Thaddeus quickly helped her sip from a glass, supporting her head with one hand. You're safe, he said when she'd drunk her fill. You're at the Circle L ranch. I found you collapsed on my land yesterday. Caroline stared at him, processing his words slowly. How far? She whispered, her voice raspy from disuse and damage. From Mercer? About 80 miles north, he answered. You walked 80 miles in this heat. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Aiming for Caldwell. That's another 20 miles at least, Thaddeus said, astonished at her determination. What possessed you to attempt such a journey on foot? Caroline closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. No choice. School closed. No money for stage. Before Thaddeus could respond, Martha entered with a tray bearing broth and more water. Well now, look who's decided to join the land of the living, she said warmly. You gave us quite a scare, Miss Porter. Caroline's eyes widened slightly at the use of her name. Your Bible, Thaddeus explained. We needed to know who you were. I'm Martha Jenkins, housekeeper here at Circle L, Martha continued, settling the tray across Thaddeus's lap so she could help Caroline into a more upright position, propped against pillows. And this worry-faced man is Thaddeus Lawson, owner of All You Can See for miles around. Thank you, Caroline whispered. Both of you. No thanks needed yet, Martha replied briskly. Not until we've got some nourishment in you. Now, small sips of broth, nothing too fast. Over the next days, Caroline's strength returned gradually. The doctor visited twice more, marveling at her resilience. Most would have died out there, he told Thaddeus privately. She's got extraordinary determination. Thaddeus found himself drawn to Caroline's bedside, initially bringing books to read to her, then simply talking. He told her about the ranch, about his childhood in Missouri, about his brief marriage to Sarah, who had died in childbirth along with their infant son. In turn, as her voice strengthened, Caroline shared stories of Boston, of her decision to become a teacher, of the small triumphs and heartbreaks of her 18 months in Mercer. I loved those children, she said one afternoon, sitting in a chair by the window for the first time. Even the Hollister twins, who put a garden snake in my desk drawer. Thaddeus laughed. Sounds like something I would have done as a boy. I believe it, Caroline replied with a smile that transformed her still healing face. You have that look about you. What look is that? Mischief, barely contained beneath a veneer of respectability. He raised an eyebrow. Miss Porter, I'm the most respectable rancher in 3 counties. So you say, Mr. Lawson. But your eyes give you away. As July turned to August, Caroline regained enough strength to take short walks in the garden Martha had somehow maintained despite the drought. Her skin was healing, though the doctor warned some scarring might remain. Her hair, which Martha had carefully washed and trimmed, caught golden highlights in the evening sun. You should write to your parents, Thaddeus suggested one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. They must be worried. Caroline shook her head. They died 2 years ago. Influenza took them both within days of each other. I'm sorry, he said quietly. No siblings. An older brother in California. We write occasionally, but he has his own family to worry about. She looked out at the vast landscape. What about you? Any family besides your sister in St. Louis? Just Margaret. She writes monthly, inviting me to visit. Really, she wants to parade eligible society women before me. He smiled ruefully. She can't understand why I'm content here. And are you? Content. The question hung between them, more significant than its simple words suggested. Thaddeus considered before answering. I was. Before. He met her eyes. Now I'm not sure. Caroline looked away first, a flush spreading across her cheeks that had nothing to do with her lingering sunburn. The drought broke in late August with a thunderstorm that shook the house and flooded the parched earth. Thaddeus and his men worked through the night, securing livestock and repairing damage to outbuildings. When he finally returned to the house, soaked and exhausted, he found Caroline in the kitchen, helping Martha prepare food for the ranch hands. "You shouldn't be on your feet so much," he said, accepting the towel she handed him. "I've been useless for weeks," she replied. "It feels good to help." He studied her as he dried his hair. The simple blue dress Martha had altered from one of Margaret's left-behind garments suited her, emphasizing the returning curves of her figure and the creamy skin of her neck and forearms. "Caroline," he began, then paused, uncertain how to proceed. She looked up from the bread she was slicing, a question in her eyes. "The school in Riverford is looking for a teacher," he said finally. "I mentioned your name to the town council chairman when he came by last week." Her face lit up. "Truly? They need a teacher?" "They do. Term starts in 2 weeks." He hesitated. "It's a good position. Better pay than Mercer. Proper accommodations included." "That's wonderful news," Caroline said, though her smile faltered slightly. I should make arrangements to travel there soon." "Yes," Thaddeus agreed, a heaviness settling in his chest. "You should." Martha, who had been suspiciously quiet during this exchange, suddenly found urgent business in the pantry, leaving them alone. "Thaddeus," Caroline said softly, using his given name for the first time. "I can never repay your kindness." "There's nothing to repay," he replied gruffly. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she contradicted gently. "Not anyone. You saved my life." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with words unsaid. Thaddeus took a step toward her, then stopped, his hands clenching at his sides. "I should check on the men," he said abruptly, turning away. "Make sure they have what they need." He strode from the kitchen, out into the rain that had softened to a steady drizzle. Standing under the porch roof, he drew deep breaths of the damp air, rich with the scent of wet earth and renewal. What was wrong with him? Caroline Porter was a respectable, educated woman with her own ambitions and plans. She deserved the opportunity to pursue her teaching career, not to be burdened with the awkward attentions of a rough cattleman who'd forgotten how to court a lady, if he'd ever known. For her part, Caroline watched his retreat with a mixture of confusion and disappointment. In the weeks of her recovery, something had grown between them, something she'd never experienced before. Not just gratitude on her part, or compassion on his, but a deeper connection that seemed to strengthen with each conversation, each shared glance. But perhaps she'd misread him. Perhaps his interest was merely that of a decent man ensuring the well-being of someone under his protection. The thought left her feeling hollow. The next day, Thaddeus announced he needed to ride to Riverford on business. "I'll be gone 2 days," he told Caroline over breakfast. "Is there anything you need from town?" "No, thank you," she replied, not meeting his eyes. "I have everything I need." He nodded stiffly and left without another word, the distance between them suddenly vast and inexplicable. After he'd gone, Martha found Caroline in the garden, ostensibly weeding but really just sitting with her hands idle in her lap. "That man," Martha said without preamble, "is the most stubborn creature God ever put on this earth." Caroline looked up, startled. "I beg your pardon." "Thaddeus Lawson. Stubborn as the day is long." Martha settled her substantial frame onto the bench beside Caroline. "Been that way since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. His father was just the same." "I don't understand what you're telling me, Martha." The older woman sighed. "He's in love with you, child. Has been since you opened those green eyes of yours and asked for water. But he won't say it because he thinks you deserve better than a rough cowman with dirt under his nails." Caroline's heart skipped. "That's absurd. I'm a penniless schoolteacher who nearly died on his property. If anything, I'm beneath his station." Martha chuckled. "Lord, you're as bad as he is. Listen to me, Caroline Porter. I've known that boy since he was born. Watched him grow into a man any woman would be proud to call husband. When his Sarah died, something in him went cold. I never thought I'd see it warm again." She patted Caroline's hand. "Until you stumbled into his life." "What am I supposed to do with this information?" Caroline asked, flustered. "He's arranged a teaching position for me in Riverford. He clearly wants me to move on." "Does he now?" Martha's eyes twinkled. Then why did he spend 3 hours yesterday talking to Reverend Phillips about repairs to the schoolhouse here on the ranch? What schoolhouse? The one built 5 years ago for the children of his ranch hands. It's sat empty since the last teacher married and moved to Kansas City. Martha stood. Just something to consider before you rush off to Riverford. That evening, Caroline asked one of the ranch hands to show her the schoolhouse. It was a simple building, sturdy and well-constructed, with large windows to admit light and air. Inside were desks for perhaps 15 students, a teacher's desk at the front, and bookshelves filled with readers, arithmetic texts, and even a set of encyclopedias. Caroline ran her fingers over the dusty volumes, her mind racing. Why hadn't Thaddeus mentioned this place? Why arrange a position in Riverford if there was need for a teacher right here? Unless he didn't want her to stay. The thought brought an unexpected ache to her chest. In the weeks of her recovery, the Circle L had begun to feel like home in a way no place had since her parents' house in Boston. She'd come to love the vast openness of the prairie, the dramatic skies, the rhythm of ranch life. Most of all, she'd come to cherish her conversations with Thaddeus, his dry humor, his thoughtful observations, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. When had admiration and gratitude transformed into something deeper, something that made her heart race when he entered a room. Thaddeus returned from Riverford late the following day. Caroline heard his arrival from her bedroom window, the sound of hoofbeats, men's voices calling greetings, midnight's distinctive whinny. She remained where she was, unsure what to say to him after her discoveries and Martha's revelations. Dinner that evening was a strained affair. Thaddeus spoke little, answering Caroline's polite inquiries about his trip with brief, distracted responses. Martha maintained a steady stream of chatter that neither of them really heard, exchanging exasperated glances with Samuel, who had joined them at the table. After the meal, Caroline excused herself to the porch, claiming a desire for fresh air. The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky in dizzying profusion. The air held the first hint of autumn crispness, a welcome change from summer's oppressive heat. She didn't turn when she heard the door open behind her, though she knew from the tread that it was Thaddeus. "Beautiful night," he said, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "Yes," she agreed. "I never saw stars like this in Boston. Too many buildings, too much smoke." They stood in silence for a moment, the space between them charged with unspoken words. "I visited the schoolhouse yesterday," Caroline said finally. "The one for your ranch children." She felt rather than saw him stiffen. "Martha told you. She mentioned it. Why didn't you?" Thaddeus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It seemed presumptuous. More presumptuous than arranging a position for me in Riverford." She turned to face him, needing to see his expression. That was different. Riverford is a proper town, with society, culture, things a lady like you would want. "A lady like me," Caroline repeated softly. "And what kind of lady do you think I am, Thaddeus Lawson?" He met her eyes then, his own dark with emotion. "The kind who deserves more than I can offer. I walked 80 miles across drought-stricken prairie with nothing but the clothes on my back and a Bible in my pocket," she said. "Do you really think I care about society and culture?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "When you put it that way. Tell me about the schoolhouse," she said. "How many children would attend?" 12 currently," he answered, seeming to relax slightly. "Ages 6 to 14. Children of my ranch hands, and a few from neighboring smaller spreads." "And where would the teacher live?" His eyes dropped from hers. "There's a small cottage behind the schoolhouse. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. Or, she prompted when he didn't continue. "Or there's room here, in the main house." His voice was so low she barely caught the words. "If the teacher preferred." Caroline's heart pounded in her chest. And would the teacher take her meals with the ranch owner and his staff? If she wished. And would she be expected to help with household duties? Garden work, perhaps? Only if it pleased her to do so. He was looking at her again, something like hope kindling in his eyes. And her salary? What would that be? "Room and board," he said, "plus $20 a month. More when, the ranch prospers after the drought." "A generous offer," Caroline murmured. "But I wonder if there might be other compensation the teacher might negotiate." Thaddeus stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "What did you have in mind, Miss Porter?" "Perhaps," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The occasional walk with the ranch owner. Conversations like we've shared these past weeks. Maybe, in time, other considerations. Other considerations, he repeated, his voice rough. Such as, instead of answering, Caroline reached up and placed her hand against his cheek. His skin was warm, the stubble of his beard rough against her palm. For a moment, he remained still, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. Then, with a sound that was half groan, half sigh, he covered her hand with his own, turning his face to press a kiss to her palm. Caroline, he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. I have no right to ask this of you. You haven't asked anything, she reminded him. But if you're wondering whether I would consider staying here, teaching your ranch children, sharing your home, and perhaps more, then the answer is yes. You could have a better life elsewhere, he persisted, though his free hand had found its way to her waist, drawing her closer. I walked 100 miles searching for a better life, she said, and I found it the moment you carried me through your door. His resistance crumbled then. He pulled her fully into his arms, one hand cradling the back of her head as his lips found hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent, then deepened as she responded, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally parted, both breathless, Thaddeus rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the first day you were well enough to argue with me about Shakespeare. Caroline laughed softly. I still maintain that Portia is a more admirable character than Romeo. And I still disagree, he replied, kissing her again briefly. But I look forward to a lifetime of such arguments. A lifetime, she repeated, testing the weight of the word. Is that a proposal, Mr. Lawson? Not yet, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. When I propose, Miss Porter, it will be done properly, with a ring and on bended knee. But consider this fair warning that such a proposal is imminent. I'll consider myself warned, she said with a smile that outshone the stars above. Later that night, as Caroline lay in her bed, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. A desperate walk across a hostile landscape, driven by nothing more than the will to survive and find something better. She had nearly died pursuing that hope. Instead, she had found not just survival, but the promise of joy, purpose, and love in a place and with a man she could never have imagined when she set out for Mercer all those weeks ago. Sometimes, she thought as sleep claimed her, the longest journeys lead to the most unexpected destinations. And sometimes, salvation comes in the form of a tall cowboy with kind eyes, who finds you when you're at your lowest and sees in you something worth cherishing.